how to deal with narcissists? That's the question. Well, before you get to dealing with narcissists, you need to know who they are. You need to identify them. It's, in popular culture, unfortunately, people have been using terms without understanding them. It's, popular psychology, and terms that people have seen mentioned in articles and in papers and magazines and movies and video, things like that. And most people who talk about them, unless they are trained in identifying various psychological disorders or personality traits and spend some time training or are licensed to talk about it, people will have just scant, information, data, a little bit here, a little bit there, and use those. One of the things that when you're being trained to become a therapist at universities and then also in practicum sites, and then when you're doing your hours as an intern, as an associate, and then later on as an actual licensed, therapist, you get a full exposure to the ways to identify the traits, the characteristics that make a person this way or that. Now I say this because it's many times people are giving themselves the authority or the right to go ahead and diagnose another. I used to see this in my patients when I used to practice, and as a therapist. People would come and try to convince me that they have this and that or XYZ disorders because their mate, their wife or somebody, their friends have been saying that he or she has this disorder. And I would gently challenge them by saying, well, does your husband, does your wife know, does she have any training in this field? Not to be, demeaning or sarcastic. I was just curious, is she qualified basically? Is he qualified to give you this diagnosis? And they would say, no, of course not. I was like, okay. But I do have these things because I looked up the DSM, I looked up the symptoms, I looked at this and that, and so it matches. Well, it's not as simple as that. So this is in the case of various, disorder of the week, just like we have soup of the day, soup du jour. This is not like that when we're dealing with narcissists. You don't need to have somebody else tell you that this person is a narcissist, because ultimately it really doesn't matter. Because if a narcissist is in your life, then oftentimes, unfortunately, you're the last person to know. That's one thing. This plays along with what I said earlier, like you first have to identify your situation to see what's happening. So first of all, you need to check yourself. This is the key. To identify whether there is any parasitical reality taking place, a dynamic that is very parasitical, like parasite. So some of the easiest ways to identify whether you're in such a toxic situation, despite what society tells you that, these percentages or statistics, they're always wrong. My experience has always proven that it's wrong. Like, for example, in many articles, many even books, and as I mentioned, pop psychology, and even with working with supervisors over the years and fellow therapists, I would be given this number, like, oh yeah, you see more narcissists in men. And I always approach things with a grain of salt. First, I treat the data as valid, but I'm going to test it out. Obviously, I would also read the articles. I wouldn't just go by today what you have is a society, or even in intelligentsia or academicians themselves would just read the title of a paper, of an article, even if it's peer-reviewed, which is another misnomer, because it's just, oh, okay, it's peer-reviewed, meaning there's nothing new in there, right? If it's peer-reviewed, then there's nothing scientific in it, really. Science is challenging. It's challenging the status quo. That's how we have new technologies showing up, new inventions happening, new science coming out. Not because it's being reviewed by peers. Otherwise, they're going to be the quickest to shoot it down because it doesn't match the narrative of the majority. That's the peer review the circle that they talk about, which is one of the things that postmodernist thinkers and philosophical schools came up with. And the academia that we have today, including therapists and all that, medical field as well, they're stuck. There's nothing new coming out. Science happens in the fringes, as the saying goes. And I didn't make that saying. It's come out of the mouth of actual 100% scientists who are always ready to challenge their own discoveries that they just made yesterday if there's new data coming in. That is tremendously courageous. So, having said those things, I would read the articles, the heading, I would read the abstract if it's something like a presentation at a conference or something. And then I would read the article completely, all the way to the end, especially when it has the conclusion, the findings. What is the conclusion of this article? Oftentimes, they need to state if there's any conflict of interest. They need to also talk about the populations that were included in this survey, in this experiment. And they need to say clearly that these were the outcomes, which oftentimes have nothing to do, at least they're not reflected in the title of the paper, which most people are reading only. This is serious. So anyhow, I would often find that the women I was seeing in my sessions, the mothers, the wives, or the girlfriends, or even the bosses, supervisors, etc., they're equally narcissistic, if not more. Usually it was more than the men that I was seeing, who were oftentimes the victims of narcissists, women narcissists. Now, this does not mean in any way, shape, or form that men are always narcissists, or women or victims of narcissists, or women are always narcissists. No, that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is what I earlier mentioned. We need to take things with a grain of salt. The person will know, because they will be the first, they're there in the front line of what is happening. So some of the things that they need to be looking at are asking basically some basic questions. Basic questions. Such as, how do I feel when this person comes into this room, when I spend time with them? Again, this does not have to be only with intimate relationships, although it does happen a lot in many such intimate relationships, but it could also be in a professional setting with colleagues, family especially, siblings, etc., etc., where there's some type of a relationship. But during those encounters, how do you feel? And when I say feel, I mean not what you tell yourself mentally, cognitively. Now, for this, you need to check with your body. If you feel threatened, that's a big sign that you're feeling unsafe, basically, right? So you are not at ease. Usually this manifests in the form of tension, muscle tension, which usually, again, happens in the visceral area, in the gut. Or you breathe shallow, or you even catch yourself every so often during that encounter reminding yourself to breathe. Or it's a very shallow type of breathing. Even so, you feel like you need to excuse yourself to go and breathe, or go to the bathroom and just like, what's happening? Now, I might be presenting for you an extreme example. Nevertheless, there's a gradient here. And only the person undergoing this, especially through a stretch of time, where you do have a reference to compare to. Another question to ask yourself is this: would I do to this person what they are doing to me? Because what a narcissist does very skillfully is several things. They are, first of all, masters at turning things around. Gaslighting is another term, by the way, where they will turn whatever they were doing just now that is in your book, to your understanding, to your own values, completely off-putting, completely unacceptable. And you just saw them do that. You just heard them. You witnessed them do that, or heard about them doing that, and you confronted them. One of the things that a narcissist does is he or she will completely flip things around. They will present to you a situation where you start doubting reality. So basically, they are experts at creating psychosis in you. And this also makes them feel extremely powerful, good, and they tap themselves in the back and saying, wow, this is, I can't believe I just pulled it off. What a gullible fool. What an idiot. You know what? I think she deserves it, or I think he deserves it. Why? Because I would never fall for that. That's why narcissists also are very skilled, shall we say, at hiding their illegal, unethical, improper, and completely immoral behaviors. Now, sooner or later, they do get caught. Unfortunately, not by that person, their victim. And by the way, if they come across a person who has some experience, who have done their due diligence in learning some of the signs, hearing about it, going and reading on it, on the subject. So you might be protected from them. But there are many, many more people who are not. So what the narcissist does, they will just drop you and then move on to someone else. Well, who does that? Is there another organism or parasite is not necessarily an organism, but a parasite does it. They just jump to the next victim. Every once in a while you hear about these people. But the most sadistic ones are the ones that are in established relationships, where you notice this happening in couples a lot, or in employees with a very mean, bossy, boss, supervisor. Now, I said earlier that narcissist utilizes various different things. One of the other things that they do very good is they shower you with compliments, they shower you with some type of a thing which they have done their own due diligence in reading you, hearing, trying to extract information from you, feigning interest initially just to gather information, just like a spy does in espionage. Now, once they have that data, they will flip the table, they will flip the rules, they will use all that against you. Now, you have been approached by them in the first place for a reason. Why? Because they have seen that you have some values. They don't. Ultimately, the narcissist serves only their ego, their own self-interests. And if they cannot get it from you, from this area, from this crowd, from this person, they're going to switch, they're going to go somewhere else. Because the field is vast, and it's always hunting season for them. They can, so long as they have, people around them, they will find some gullible person to take the bait. Now, they might approach you with flattery. They might approach you with any kind of interest you have. Let's say if it's art, they will approach you through that. If you appreciate the finer things in life, they will approach through that. If you appreciate beauty, attractiveness, etc., physical beauty, they will approach you. And they constantly work on presenting an image of themselves that in reality is just, 100% of the time, is just a ruse. It's just a facade, a very thin layer. Because what happens? Sooner or later, because of their malintent, it will cause them, their ego, their superiority complex, it will drive them, because they're still human, and because they are not guided by higher values and principles of caring, of true empathy towards others. They don't have that. They simply don't have that. So they are self-serving, as I said. That will, sooner or later, lead them to show their true colors, despite all their best efforts. Sometimes, because they are trying to juggle so many things at the same time. Like those circus acrobats, with spinning plates that we used to see on TV of when we were children, of circus performers. They have to keep them spinning. Well, they're not that perfect. They're very good. I've seen some very vicious ones that, really terrible, terrible people. Men and women narcissists. I've seen them in my life. But the key thing that will happen, unfortunately for many people, even though you might be able to see, or somebody might come and tell you, hey, this person did this or said this about you, or you will take that, but then you will fall back on something that will convince you that that information that you just received was wrong, or what you just saw. You want to believe otherwise than what you just saw, because they have presented, the narcissists have presented for you an image that is simply an image. but you've taken it as a reality. Now, you have to keep up pretenses. So lies, etc., are one of their fortes, one of their strongest points, to lie. And their fear, they have a fear. They are always afraid of being caught, always afraid of being discovered, always afraid that they're going to lose that victim because they put a lot of effort into, putting you on the gurney in IV, and you are a slave to them because you serve a purpose. So narcissists rarely have only one victim. So if it's a woman who's in a relationship with someone, they will have several partners, but none of them know about each other. Okay? Meanwhile, they are telling themselves that this could never happen to herself, because it's impossible, because she's so good at cheating. She's so good. No one could outsmart her because she's covered all the bases. And for that reason, they are, narcissists will go and study this material now. They will study on how to outsmart the system. So I've seen people who go and study law, principles of legal matters, how to evade, how to outsmart, how to do this. And sadly also in the field of social sciences and humanities, and specifically in the helping professions as therapists, many of them have become therapists, sadly, to the detriment of the community, because that means they will use these techniques to even go underground, as they say, subterranean, where they really will use some techniques to hide, but that will blow up in their face sooner or later. Always does. So, without going too far into tangents, ask yourself this question. When you've discovered that you feel depleted, you are feeling drained, and you keep hearing about, the narcissist coming to you and saying, if it's not for me, then they won't love you. These people that you call your friends, which is one of the reasons why narcissists will try to isolate you, to make you their own property, their little plaything, their little experiment. You are owned by them. That's their ideal, to get you to come to. So they are very sadistic. Now, would you do such a thing to another human being? That particular person in your life, whether it's that supervisor, whether it's your partner, whether it's brother or sister, you need to develop the strength to speak up and to say, ouch, at least, to yourself, to acknowledge that, instead of making up excuses to defend that partner who is truly the narcissist. If you find yourself, basically, always covering up for them, always justifying their actions to yourself, you can make sure that you actually, you can know for sure, pretty much, that you've fallen victim to them, because they are really into you. You've been baited. But again, this has many things to do with your own past. Let's not, just look at one person here, the narcissist. Yeah, but the narcissist exists because you are walking into the trap. I've never come across any narcissist, whether in my life, in my practice, and whatever I've studied, read experiments and all that, studies. Any narcissist who went out of his way to come to the person, to pull them out of their world and to make them a victim, usually, if not 100% of the time, the victim walks into the trap. So basically, I was saying, taking the bait, right? Well, the fisherman is going to try to catch a fish. He's going to toss the bait in there, but the fish can outsmart the fisherman and not swim in that part of the bay, that part of the, ocean, the lake. They can see it from afar and walk away, swim away. So you need to ask yourself, why is it that you keep going to such a person? Despite the fact that you're in pain, you're hurting. Why do you keep lying for them, to yourself? So there might be emotional issues. You might have had narcissists in your life to begin with as your caretakers, to whom you always, went begging for their attention. It's part of attachment theory. You can call that insecure or ambivalent type of attachment. So the mother would hug you and then they would just ignore you. What is your past? So this is why it's really critical for you to go and find yourself a really good therapist, empathetic therapist to work with, or at least journal or read on the subject from qualified individuals who know what they're talking about. So there was a book I read some years ago. It's called Safe People. That's a very good book. I don't know if it's still in print. I had given it to somebody to read, a fellow therapist, and they never brought it back. Anyhow, but that's a good book, among other books. But ask yourself, this thing that they're doing to me, let's say they stood you up. If you were going to have a lunch date, or if you're going to do this, or you spent time, you did this, and they bail out on you, or they hurt you, and then they say, I'm sorry, let's say, which they're very good at if it serves their purpose. Because you have to remember, it's always about them, the narcissist. All that happens at the end of the day has to serve them. Has to make them look good. So in essence, they are never givers. They are takers. The narcissist will never give you anything, ultimately. If they give you, it's very small, it's very insignificant, and they're not protective of you or your whatever belongs to you. If they look like they are doing something to protect you, it's actually to add another layer of that ruse, that jig, that ploy that they're using. So ask yourself, would I do this to anyone, let alone my loved one? For example, if it's an intimate relationship like that. People use I'm sorry a lot. At least in America, in the United States, people use that a lot. And it's one of the most useless things that I've heard. I used to say this, I used to confront my teenage students when I was a high school teacher. I would say, listen, you're sorry. I might, accept it. First few times, I listened to your reasons, but ultimately, it's no longer cutting it, because it's a pattern, and I have to trust your behavior, and your behavior is not reflecting your I'm sorry. Plus, there's the repeatability of the act itself. So ask yourself, would I even do this once to this person? Let's say cheating, causing harm to you. Would you do that to them? And if the answer is an absolute no, for most of these victims, in fact, if they're by themselves and they're being honest with themselves, they will say immediately, no, I would never do that to them. I would never do that to him. I would never do that to her. Then you need to wait for a few seconds and listen to yourself. Listen to your heart. That would be your first step in acknowledging yourself. And that is one of the best ways that I know that you can walk out of the trap for good. Because now you're giving yourself the dignity which the narcissist has systemically, strategically been stripping it away from you. And they're good at that. They strip away your dignity, your integrity, in the guise of, oh, I care about you, I love you, you're the only one, I'm the only one who loves you, this and that. Remember the isolationist? Because they will work night and day to figure out ways of how to isolate you from your loved ones. Those individuals who really, again and again, over your life with them, have shown you that they love you and care about you. This person will come to cut you off, to sever your connection from them, and come up with reasons and lies. Oh, that's the other thing that narcissists are excellent at. They're devious, they're sadistic, because they think the whole system is out to get them, and they usually will rely on some experience from their past as a justifying factor. Maybe they have a chip on their shoulder with life, against life. Oh yeah, I'm going to go and make the most of all these opportunities. All these gullible characters that come my way, but they will, because they also are afraid that they're going to lose that opportunity. So they are fighting themselves, they're fighting life, but they're definitely enjoying the most from what they get from this, that, those people over there, and always doing the spinning of those ceramic plates overhead, hoping that nothing falls. So this causes them to always be on edge, agitated, anxious. And this is one of the reasons why they also will, every so often, let their hair down, as they say. They will get into some type of addiction, because this is a very big source of addiction itself, but they will also get into drinking, alcohol. They will get into drugs, or some other type of addiction. But lies, falsehood, is one of their best tools. Imagine, you need to be a master liar to come up with, gaslighting strategies when you're flipping the whole reality. When you're doing something horrific and the other person sees you, catches you doing it, you turn it on them. You avoid the subject. You say, well, let's not focus on that. Meanwhile, the partner would never do such a thing. So the victim needs to pause and ask, would I do such a thing to another, especially to this person, to this significant partner of mine? And if the answer is no, run out of that relationship. Run. Don't ever look back. Work with a good therapist. Do some journaling continuously. Spend some time by yourself, because you're going to make it. You will make it through, because you will stand on your 2 feet. A narcissist will never carry you, you know. They are burdening you. They're stripping you from your humanity, from your integrity. They are not really. They don't know love. I'm sad to say. And it might be dependent on various different factors from their past. It's not important at this point. They are like leeches, parasites, that suck your life from you. So it behooves upon the person to pause and ask themselves, why do I keep going back to this person? Why do I keep texting them? Why do I keep emailing them? Why do I keep calling them, asking them to come up with different things to start a conversation so that they could accept me back? Or I want to change their mind. I want them to like me. Why are you so desperate in having such a person like you? What's wrong with the person who's looking at you in the mirror? When was the last time you told yourself, you know, even though I'm being told that nobody loves me except for this person, the person who's telling me this, but when was the last time I actually told myself I love myself? That's not narcissism, by the way. I wish everyone would say that to themselves every morning before they left their home, their room, their bathroom. And throughout the day, if you can. There will be so much less crime in the world. There would be so much more love and understanding in the world. So you need to understand and appreciate and love yourself first. And you do that by checking in with yourself. Because as you walk away from an interaction, you need to be feeling good. If you're not feeling good, that's another telltale sign that you are dealing with a bad person. It's a vampire. It's an energy vampire. It's a parasite. Take from you. Well, are you a taker like that? No? Okay, you have nothing to do with this person. Whatever they're trying to sell, you're not buying. Walk away. Fly away from such a person. Because you have other things going for you. Because you have evolved. They haven't. They are in a constant state of de-evolution. They constantly dehumanize themselves. Are you? Do you feel empathy towards others? And I'm not saying every once in every blue moon. No. Because the narcissist will come sometimes with tears in their eyes. Remember alligator tears? They're experts at lying. Because they don't know how to feel deeply. These are real. And by the way, narcissists will never go to therapy to fix themselves. They're always there to find new tools to deal with the world because they have no problems. They're perfect. It's a major personality disorder, you know. It's unfixable, in my opinion. So what do? You avoid them. You avoid them. And you don't confront them. You don't necessarily have to confront them. Because that might, depending on what type of a narcissist, because there's different gradations of it. Some might take it very, personally when you expose them. They don't like to be exposed. Oh, that's like, no. They're very vengeful. But the best way to remember, the whole world is for them, for the taking. That's how they function. If it's not you, don't worry. There's over there. There's a lot of idiots over there that are very gullible. Thank you very much. They might actually provide them with more sustenance than you ever did. So they have no vested interest in you, ultimately. So never will their roots go deep enough to establish a meaningful relationship. They don't know the meaning of it. So don't worry about that. But don't be concerned about going and confronting them either. That doesn't serve anything. You're not going to help society by exposing them in a sense either. The best way to do is you protect yourself and you inform others who are in similar situations perhaps by giving them clues as to what they need to do to protect themselves from swimming into such dangerous waters. And if they're not there, they won't be taking any baits, right? So I think that answers somewhat the question. Let's give it.